A politician in Massachusetts used the eviction moratorium to not pay rent. Meanwhile, he was making over $100,000 a year. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News.
Danny Lee works for the Holbrook Department of Public Works and is the chair of the select board. He's the top elected official in town.
Purchase of, I think, a few years ago.
Lee and his wife, who is the assistant collector in Holbrook, now under fire for not paying thousands of dollars in rent to their elderly landlord while living at this home at 39 Calmia Road.
All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's one of those situations where it just really frustrates and annoys me, okay? So we have the case here of a politician up in the state of Massachusetts, right, who basically used the eviction moratorium to keep from having to pay their landlord anything. Meanwhile, he was working, his wife was working, they didn't lose any income at all throughout the entire pandemic. And then guess what? As soon as the pandemic was over, they bought a $400,000 house. They left their rental property, and they left their landlord owing them way more than $10,000. So it's an absolutely crazy story. It's hard to believe that stuff like this actually goes on, but this is what I have been saying in video after video after video. And it's the worst part about this is that the politician was scamming the system. They knew that they could scam this system and they thought they could get away with it. But I'm going to put the exposure on this guy because, he's a scammer. He's a complete scammer and a piece of crap on top of it, okay? But before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below and let me know, okay? Have you had other tenants who didn't pay rent during the pandemic, who you knew were working, who you knew were just scamming you and abusing the eviction moratorium so that they could get away with not paying any rent? That's the worst part about all this is, they passed all these laws. Oh, we're going to help these tenants. Well, the only thing they helped were the scammers, okay? And we ended up with a lot of tenants who got to live off of our backs for over a year, and that's completely ridiculous, okay? So let's get into the article and see what it says. This article comes from WCVB.com, and it says, elderly landlord says top Holbrook official used COVID eviction ban to avoid payment or avoid paying rent. Yeah, and not a good story. Let's hope that this doesn't happen to you. Let's get into it. Holbrook, Massachusetts. A man without a soul. That's what an elderly landlord is calling one town's top elected official. They wonder why that man, the chair of the select board in Holbrook, and his wife, also a town employee, have not paid almost thousands of dollars in rent to them and question their now former tenants' use of COVID-19 eviction moratorium protections last year. Eviction moratorium protections were meant to help people financially impacted by the virus by preventing them from becoming homeless. Tens of thousands of eviction cases have been filed across the state, but this case involves two renters who records show have been gainfully employed throughout the pandemic. Well, that goes back to one of the points that I've been pointing out since the very beginning. Tenants didn't have to actually prove that they needed the protections of the eviction moratorium before they were just lumped in under it. All they had to do was to fill out a little statement. In some places, they didn't even have to fill out a statement. They just were automatically protected, whether they lost their jobs or not. So how many tenants do you really think, how long do you think it would be before they figured out, hey, if I don't pay the rent, they still won't be able to evict me? Well, a lot of them figured this out. And the small mom and pop landlords are the ones suffering because guess what? Now they're paying not only for their own living accommodations, but they're paying for the living accommodations for tenants who are working. And, I just covered an article that went on in New Orleans area where tenants were taking the rental assistance money because the stupid rental assistance program in New Orleans was paying tenants directly. And the tenants were taking that rental assistance money and buying jet skis and big screen TVs. So, yeah, there's so much potential for the tenants to just completely screw over landlords in all of the eviction moratorium, in the rental assistance and everything. And there's not a way for landlords to get, to screw over the tenants during this. It's not like the landlords are getting anything out of it other than the money that they're owed. So, I mean, I am super frustrated, and this article highlights one of the worst case scenarios, okay? Daniel Lee is an equipment operator for the Holbrook Department of Public Works, but he is also the chair of the Holbrook Select Board, as well as the town's Board of Assessors. His wife, Brenda Stapleton Lee, is Holbrook's assistant collector. Lee and his wife are now under fire for not paying thousands of dollars in rent to their landlords, Michaela Rogers and her husband, while living in their rental property at 39 Kalmia Road in Holbrook. Through the end of last year, housing court records had the amount of unpaid rent at $10,200. But Rogers' lawyer said this year the amount of back rent owed to his clients grew significantly. They don't have any souls or hearts because they're taking advantage of us. They really are, Rogers said. It's very stressful because we can't go anywhere and do anything. All our money is tied up. It's just payout. Just keep paying out and paying out. Yeah, and that's exactly what small landlords are having to do. They have to keep paying all of their bills for their living expenses. Then they have to pay the bills and all the living expenses for these renters as well. Okay, this isn't a super rich money making, diving in a money bin where they can just keep on. Oh yeah, we could pay for these these tenants forever. No, they have bills, they have other obligations, and they are being screwed over by these greedy tenants. And that's not even the worst part. And, we're going to get into that here in a little bit in this article. So let's keep going. Rogers has sleepless nights worrying about her finances. She and her husband are both retired, living on a fixed income. They blame the Lees and the thousands of dollars in unpaid rent for all that stress. In October 2020, Lee and his wife sent her signed forms claiming they were protected from eviction under the CDC eviction moratorium. He said, "I don't have to pay anymore. I've got proof that I don't have to pay because I qualify for aid," Rogers said. Attorney Jeff Turk specializes in landlord-tenant issues. "I think the purpose of the law was to help people who are having an effect from COVID." And he's right. The purpose of the law was to help people who are having an effect from COVID. But the law was still unconstitutional. The law should have never passed in the first place. There shouldn't have even been a chance that landlords would lose this sort of money. Instead, they should have never had an eviction moratorium. If they wanted to have the rental assistance program, they could have still pumped that money out directly to landlords, of course, who weren't getting paid. Otherwise, the landlord still should have had the right to move forward with eviction on these tenants. Now, some of the things here that bother me the most is, they're living on a fixed income. They're retired. They don't have a whole ton of money to just, spend to keep these people up in this house for free. I mean, don't people realize a lot of people use these properties as their retirement? So when they're not getting paid, they're really losing out. Turk said in order for tenants to get relief under the CDC's program, they have to meet several requirements. You are required to show that you had income of less than $190,000 if you file jointly, Turk said. Number 2, that you had an economic effect from COVID-19, some loss of income, that you had tried to pay your landlord what you could based on your income, that you had applied for RAFT or other rental assistance, and that you would be rendered homeless. And I don't think any of those things would have qualified. Now, my question is, and this is probably what happened. These people were suffering from financial distress due to other reasons, not the coronavirus pandemic. Now, they were working their jobs still. They obviously were still getting paid, but maybe they have a spending problem where they don't know how to manage their money, and then they weren't paying rent because of that. Well, then they use the coronavirus pandemic as an excuse for them not paying rent, when it absolutely had nothing to do with why they weren't paying. Completely ridiculous. Okay, and let's continue. Records obtained by 5 investigators show Daniel and Brenda Lee did not miss a paycheck from the town during the pandemic. Together, they earned $109,430.50 in calendar year 2020. During 2020 and this year, Rogers and her husband received a few checks for the $1,275 a month rent, But here were many months they didn't receive a dime. In 2020, the court even ordered the Lees to pay up and vacate the property by this past March. They initially agreed to leave, but then did not budge. Meanwhile, for Rogers, the bills to maintain the Kalmia Road property piled up. It's been horrendous because I have my own house. My husband and I have our own house, and I have all the bills there, and then all the bills from the Holbrook, she said. So yeah, they still have all their bills that they have to pay, and there's nothing they could do. So this couple made over $109,000. They're public employees, so guess what? Their pay is public record. So everyone knows how much these people got paid. They know that these people didn't lose their job during the coronavirus pandemic. They weren't suffering because of any of that mess. So my thing is, if they filled out that form that said that they were losing their income because of coronavirus pandemic, then that's fraud. That's just fraud, and they should be prosecuted for it, in my opinion. Okay, so yeah, that's completely ridiculous. But here is the worst part here coming in this next paragraph. Town and land court records show where some of the Lee's money may have gone. In late September, they moved into a newly built $443,000 home a few miles away in Holbrook, leaving rent unpaid at Kalmia Road and a few more headaches for their landlord behind. Scumbags, okay? Pure scumbags. They moved into a brand new $443,000 home, and they left owing this landlord tens of thousands of dollars. So to me, it sounds like they used the rent that they owe as the down payment on their brand new house. Okay, so hey, these people are living it up, making six figures, moving into a brand new house, and knowing that they didn't have to pay rent. These people should be prosecuted, in my opinion, for fraud, okay, pure fraud. And I hope that this landlord sues them and sues their butt off, okay, because they deserve any sort of punishment they get.